Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. Welcome to week number 8 of our online services. If you haven't had the chance to watch the announcements video this morning, take a moment to do so. That can be found on our Facebook page. Also can be found on our YouTube channel. In YouTube, search Moscow, Indiana Christian Church, and you should see a playlist for today's services. This week for Mother's Day, we were going to switch gears just for a little bit. We're going to have a one-off sermon. So we were doing a series the last few weeks. We'll pick that series back up next week, the Transforming Power of God. But for this week, we're going to be taking a look at the story of Ruth in the book of Ruth, and we're going to be looking at Ruth and Naomi. Now, before we go there, I want to take just a minute to think about all the moms out there right now that are struggling in this time of isolation and social distancing. So I know this has impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but I think maybe one of the groups that's maybe hit hardest is moms. Moms are trying to hold their families together, and they're pulling extra duty to do so, cooking extra meals that ordinarily kids were at school to eat lunch, and kids probably. I know my kids are snacking basically all day. It's caused our grocery bill to double or triple probably. So moms are being asked to cook and prepare a lot more food than kind of normal times. Another thing they're being asked to do is helping teachers do the homeschool. Logging into Google or Zoom meetings or whatever, moms have had to kind of transition their schedules around, work from home when possible, and also figure out how they can make time for their children to learn. And I think that's probably wearing on a lot of people, and a lot of people are ready for school to kind of end this year and transition back to normal next year. So we're hoping that can happen. And it's also been tough on some of the older moms that maybe can't see kids or grandkids because the separation. You can't physically meet right now, which they've opened that back up. So, but they've opened that back up. So if you've got any family coming over, let me give you a little hint. I recently read of a mom that had invited some friends over and had prepared a big meal, had everything ready, and asked her daughter to give the blessing for the meal. The daughter looked around and said, "Mom, I don't know what to say." Mom says, "Oh, you'll be fine. Just say what I say." So the daughter says, "Lord, why on earth did I invite all these people over?" Speaking of inviting people over, one of the first things you do before you invite anybody over is clean. Well, if you've ever tried to clean the house when the kids don't leave, that's a mess. It's like brushing your teeth with Oreos in your mouth. So one thing mothers always do is mothers always face setbacks, probably more than we realize, but every mother faces setbacks. Today's mother that we're looking at, Naomi, it wasn't any different. In fact, I think she would have felt right at home in the times that we feel that we're in now. In Ruth chapter 1, it picks up, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech." I got to stop right there for just a second. Elimelech. Kind of sounds like a song. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight. Elimelech. No? I'm sorry, that's a bad dad joke, and this is Mother's Day, so I'm trying to stay on topic from here on out. But in those days, there was a famine. They couldn't get any food, even though they were in the land of Bethlehem, which means the house of bread or the house of food. They were in a place that they should have been supplied food, but they were going through a difficult and challenging time. They were facing a setback. So they decided, we don't know, we were not given the information on who decided, but we're told that they decided to go to Moab to see if there was going to be any food there. They wanted to try their hand in a new place. We're also not told exactly when this journey took place. It just tells us in the time of the judges. Now, if you look back at the last verse of the book of Judges, it said at that time that the people basically did what they thought was right. They just kind of did whatever they wanted to do. There was really nobody in charge to tell them, not to do something, or so they just kind of went after their own way. Now, unfortunately for them, they had been given an inheritance in the land of Israel and in the land of Canaan that they had just conquered. But this family, for some reason, decides that they don't want, or they don't think they can live with that inheritance. They need something else because of a time of famine. Skipping down to verse 3, now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. I don't want to be too harsh on Naomi. We don't know her circumstance and why they actually moved. We don't know if she was driving that, saying, hey, Elimelech, we need food. We're not getting it here. Let's go to Moab. That may have been the case. Or it could have been pushed by Elimelech. Elimelech said, well, maybe let's go to Moab because maybe we can find better provision there. But regardless, she had stood by as her husband allowed them to move away from God's blessing, away from God's inheritance that they had been provided, not trusting God. So essentially they moved to Moab, a place where God didn't want them to be. And first, it cost Elimelech his life. And then they stayed. So at this point, their children have grown up. They've become adults. And she continues to kind of have a passive life. She watches as her sons marry non-believers. They marry Moabite women. Essentially, they could have returned at that point after their father had died. They could have returned to Israel, but they continued to stay in Moab, and it looks like the famine has continued. I want to encourage you to actually read this story when you get a chance this week, but I'm going to give you a condensed version of kind of what happened. So essentially, at this point, her 2 sons have died. They're married, and the famine's still going on. So Naomi grabs her 2 daughters and her daughters-in-law and says, I'm going to go back to Israel, where I'm from. You go back to your families and your gods. But I'm going to go back to Israel because I think there's food there. So one of the daughters says, okay, I'll do that. Orpah, it goes back to her family. But Ruth says, I can't do that. I know you've suffered setbacks, and I've watched you do that. And this is implied in the text, but essentially, Naomi has done something in Ruth's life that she wants to follow her no matter what. She wants to be right there by her side. Picking up at verse 16. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you. or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. So when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. The two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. Now, this shows us a really important principle of getting out of a setback. We need to find a person that is loyal to us that can actually help us get through those things. That'll call it like it is. We'll say, "Yeah, I'm gonna follow you no matter what. No matter where you go, I'll be right there with you." It's really hard to overstate what Ruth is here committing to do for Naomi. She's saying she's going to be with her through thick and thin, even to the point of death, and even beyond death. Jewish widows would have been about the lowest of the low social classes. She would have nobody to take care of her, nobody to provide for her, and in the point of her death, nobody to even bury her. Ruth's saying that she's going to go to that extreme, that she's going to take care of her even to the point of death and even past death. That she is right there by her side. Naomi had suffered setback after devastating setback. But now she was being set up for a step up. Picking up at 19. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem and as the barley harvest was beginning. Now, Naomi does something that's real easy to do when we get faced with a setback, when we come to a point where we can't make it any farther on our own. It's so easy just to blame all of our problems on God, to take away our own blame, to judge God and say this is all God's fault, and to absolve ourselves of our own inactions, to absolve ourselves of the things that we did or didn't do that we should or should not have done. But instead we blame God for the setbacks that we face in our life. But if we trust God in these things, the setback is always an opportunity. It's a setup for the next thing that God has called us to do, the thing that He wants us to accomplish for Him and for His people. And Ruth and Naomi find themselves right in this. They're leaving famine, and they've entered the land of Bethlehem, as I told you, the house of bread. And they're right here at the time of harvest. So Ruth sees her opportunity. She knows of a kinsman redeemer that may be able to marry Ruth. So Naomi kind of is behind the strings, pulling the strings here behind the scenes, telling Ruth how she needs to move forward and to establish a relationship with Boaz. Now we could say, this is, you go to church, you'll find a good man or a good woman to marry, but that's not what we should draw from this text. Maybe something better, a better application for this text might be that we meet people in church that God establishes relationships that help build His kingdom. Listen to these words from James chapter 4, beginning at 13. James 4:13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why do you not even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins. So I bring that text up with the Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz story. It's quite simple that we can create relationships to fulfill our own needs. Yet we need to remember that it's not our will that is to be done, it is the Lord's. We need to be cognizant and mindful of those things and making sure that we are trying our best to stay in God's will. And now we're going to conclude this story of Naomi and Ruth. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Naomi had suffered setback after setback, yet God was faithful to her. He was faithful to her through Ruth, through Boaz, and then through Obed. Obed, if you look that up in a dictionary, means to sustain, he who sustains. God was faithful. He faithfully gave Naomi a son that would reset her life, that would restore her position. And just as God was faithful to Naomi, he's just as faithful to you and to me. He wants to restore us, to fix what has set us back, to help us step up. To do that, he has given us a son. He has given us a child. And that son is Jesus Christ, our kinsman redeemer, the one that we can put our hope and our faith in, that no matter what we've done in our past, we can have an established relationship with God because he took our place. He took our place on a cross. He took the punishment that we deserved so that he could show us his love and how much he cares for us. And know this, if you've suffered a setback, you're set up for a reset. God wants that relationship with you. He wants you to put your faith and your hope in Jesus Christ, to repent, to turn away from where you've been, and to go where he's calling you to go.